Scooter heads. You know what keeps me humble? I'm not a pheasant plucker. I'm not a pheasant plucker, but a pheasant plucker's son. And I'll sit here plucking pheasants till the pheasant plucking's done. That's what keeps me grounded and gives me my work ethic. Scooterheads, I don't know what we're doing here. Are we a interview show? Are we a talk show? Do I give a monologue? I kind of like the monologue, to be honest, because it's all me. I can say anything I feel like saying. It's easy as far as the editing and all that kind of stuff. You know, when you interview someone, you're either going to do it over a computer, over the telephone. There's always some kind of technology. Even at CES, I used a Zoom Pod 4, which is a multi-track recording device that works off of batteries. And I just plugged in one of those external batteries, you know, like you use when you travel to make sure you have enough charge on your telephone. I just go from a USB-C straight into the Zoom Pod 4. And that's how I got my interviews. If any of you scooter heads were confused by my opening, let me just clarify. I am not a pheasant plucker, but a pheasant plucker's son, and I'll sit here plucking pheasants till the pheasant plucking's done. I got a notification from Listen Notes, LISTENNOTES, listennotes.com, and they said this podcast is in the top 5% of podcasts worldwide, which there are 8 million of them. And I just find that difficult to believe. And it wasn't me as a consumer paying money to get these statistics. I just Googled Dagwood streets, and I looked at the stuff that came up, and that was one of them. Listen Notes. It was like the 6th or 7th hit down, and I clicked on it, and it said, ranked number, in the top 5% globally, something like that. It just blew me away. Electric scooters? Really? The main thing I'm trying to say is that this is a hobby, and I make no money. I make no money from doing this podcast. I make no money. How you like me now? I make no money from doing this podcast. I make no money. How you like me now? Well, wasn't that a tad bit psychedelic? When I Googled Dagwood streets, I didn't tell you what was above my statistic of being in the top 5% of podcasts worldwide. I think it said global ranking. I think you can look it up. It's global rank or global ranking. But above that, it was Dagwood streets. Are you ready for this? Dagwood streets talks about getting into a knife fight in 1976 at his first day of work on a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier. That's what it says. I'm reading it literally word for word what I'm reading online. But it's interesting. When I did it on my phone, it came up as number 6 or 7. When I did the search on Google Chrome, that part didn't come up. It was all scooter podcast stuff. But when I researched on Safari, it came up under Streetwise English. Navy knife fight 1976. I wouldn't call it a knife fight, okay? If you want to listen to it, listen to Streetwise English. You'll hear it. It's a bit of a misnomer. It's not like two guys faced off pointing knives at each other. It was a lot more complicated than that. But I ended up, as the result of a fight, getting stabbed in the hand. So what does that have to do with scooters? Well, that person, Dagwood Streets, interviewed Greg, the chief technical officer of Fluid Freeride. I'm talking about myself like I'm in the third person. Dagwood Streets did this. Dagwood Streets says, pay attention to your batteries, customer service, how to change tires, and repair videos. Oh, wait, no. Don't pay attention to those things. What I meant to say was those are the things that Greg, the CTO from Fluid Freeride, talks about in this very interview.
Don't you look at me, let me pass on by, and don't try to talk to me, 'cause I'll just scoot on by.
I'll admit, in some more difficult service cases for those heavier scooters, I've totally jumped on the phone and spent, an hour and a half with somebody.
Really? Through.
I send them a schematic, we'll FaceTime, this and that. That's not the usual case, but if somebody really, really needs help and, it doesn't make sense for us to ship it back or for them to ship it back to us, I'm more than happy to spend that time explaining to them, some of the more difficult electrical diagnosis concepts and, or how to interpret the schematic in their case.
Well, next time I'm calling you.
You certainly can. And then also with our San Francisco shop, even though it's still shipping, if you do need to ship it, it'll be a lot quicker than shipping all the way over to the East Coast.
Yeah, that's true. Hopefully I won't have to. I'm pretty set for scooters for now, but I'm eyeballing the Inokim, and there are a couple scooters that I'm looking at, but I have a buddy that used to always say, I'm not a cheapskate, I'm waiting for the technology to improve. Like when I saw the Wolf King GT, I'm looking at my wallet. I'm like, oh, come on, man. That thing, that gold, But is it that much of an upgrade over the Wolf 11? I don't know, man. It's just super, super tempting.
Yeah, I agree. And the my admiration of the scooters and bikes doesn't end just because I work on them. When I saw the Nami, I was like, I don't care what I want to do. I want to own one. I love that thing, right? And as well as the Wolf GT, it is very evolutionary, right? We take little maybe half steps or barely a full step sometimes. I would probably say waiting that yearly cycle, you'll probably really see scooters that kind of change things up a bit. But it's still such an immature technology that the big steps, things that really revolutionize it, newer battery technology, we're introducing, I believe, is the 21, the newer cells. It escapes me the number itself.
Are they Korean?
No, the 21700 I think cells, and they're slightly larger. They're automotive grade cells.
Are they from China?
I think LG exclusively makes
LG,
them,
okay,
which is
Korean.
Korean. Yeah.
Panasonic, I think, has some pretty good batteries too, don't they?
Panasonic does as well, but that form factor specifically is from LG, and when you see them using the scooters, me and Paul from ESG were talking about it the other day, you really notice some outlying performance, especially on their charts that they have. And, stuff like that with newer battery technology, kind of, better motor control, that takes a little bit longer. That's probably, I would say, every 2 or 3 year cycle where you really see a kind of a revolution in how they control the scooters, because a lot of it right now is kind of just side filtering from the bicycle world.
People think that there's a difference, and I don't remember what it was for the Horizon, but I did get the upgraded battery. People think the difference is, well, I'll save $100, and I'll just get the cheaper batteries, because instead of going 30 miles, 25 miles is okay. But one thing that the average consumer, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is missing is you're also missing out on better torque. You're missing out on better hill climbing. People don't think about those things. They just say, well, this one gets 30 miles and this one will go 25 miles on one charge. But that is not the full picture.
No, so the one fundamental that is true for every battery is electricity, right? It's just stored potential energy. And where that deviates is exactly what you're talking about. The battery architecture, its ability to deliver current and how fast and how much and how, efficiently. whenever I'm teaching someone about electricity, I always kind of reference water, right? Plumbing and electricity actually have a lot in common. You can divert it, you can stop it, you can limit it, you can increase the size of a tube, increase its amplitude and such. And, you do not want to feed the things that are feeding your motors and electronics with a half-size pipe, so to say, right? And, where that references batteries is how efficiently can these things discharge it with the lowest amount of internal resistance without generating a more unnecessary heat, which is just wasted electrical energy. And those are things where, yes, the $100 increase in the bigger battery with better cells doesn't seem to make sense, right? Because you maybe make it akin to like a car purchase where like, oh, that's the Touring model and that's the base model. But in this case, no, electrical efficiency, same. It's actually more of a similar consideration with like a new water heater, right? Like this thing is 95% efficient. It saves X amount of money, but more so it produces, say hot water, or in this case, acceleration and velocity much more efficiently and in a much more enjoyable way that you can actually end up with, just a better riding experience and less electrical noise. Like even now some of this stuff is still quite noisy for electronics, right? You hear the and a lot of people like it, but a lot of people don't realize that's actually electrical inefficiency that you're hearing. It is a simulated sine wave controller, right? Or maybe even a controller that's kind of struggling because it's really not getting as many amps as it needs from the battery. So,
so a quieter scooter is a more efficient scooter.
Yeah, honestly, I'm sure you have some experience with that with audio equipment, with what you do. The better the electronics get, the quieter they get, the less electrical noise they create, and the more you can turn electricity into velocity quietly, cool, with a minimal amount of heat, the better that it is for the longevity of that scooter and kind of the characteristics it produces.
Well, you can tell me if I'm wrong in doing this. The 2 upgrades I recommend people to actually spend more money on are the batteries. If there's a better battery, opt for the better battery. And I just prefer hydraulic brakes. If there's a cable model and a hydraulic brake, just the feel, the maintenance, everything about hydraulic brakes. As far as lights and accessories and things like that, I don't worry about that so much because you have handlebars that you can hang stuff off. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's it's almost always my preference that despite what we were saying earlier about the drum brakes being sort of my preference.
Yeah, we just don't think the drum brakes should be dissed like they are commonly by so many people.
Yes,
right?
but
it's not that they're better.
in the world of disc brakes, my preference is almost always hydraulics. They do require a little bit more specialized tools to work on, or experience to work on, in terms of like the consumer, right? Like if you're doing this at home, it can be challenging if you've never bled a hydraulic system. But otherwise, it's a yearly thing, right? Otherwise, it's a yearly thing.
That's ambiance, by the way. The noise you hear in the background, that's not noise, it's ambiance.
It's a yearly matter, especially in the mineral oil systems, which almost all scooters are. None of them use DOT fluid like in bicycles.
Zoom and Nut, both?
Yeah, they're both mineral based,
okay.
mineral oil based, which is great because it's not caustic, it doesn't ruin finishes, and it's not hydrophilic. So it maintains its bleed. Theoretically, you should bleed it every year, but if you don't get to it, it's not going to reduce its performance or its efficacy as much as like with DOT fluid, which is nice. And then it produces consistent braking through all weather conditions, all temperature conditions. And I find that they're a little easier to set up in terms of actually aligning the caliper, which a lot of people have trouble with, and even, us on occasion teaching it, aligning the caliper where it's perfectly centered over the rotor and we don't have contact and whatnot. So I actually find them to be quite the upgrade on all aspects, but especially on the consumer side, the braking is phenomenal, right? And as these scooters get faster, a lot of people are like, I want to hit this speed, I want to hit that speed. But if you don't have a way to reject the amount of energy that you're putting out, you are not coming to a stop anytime soon, and not in a safe manner. And so I love hydraulic brakes. I think they're the way to go.
And do you have a preference, or have you seen much of a difference between Nut and Zoom as far as the product and company?
It's funny. It's really more of a matter of choosing the correct brake pads, right? Either using different compounds or at least a quality version of whatever compound you choose, as well as the right rotors that have the ability to cool themselves down. Because the name of the game with brakes is that they're absorbing heat, right? They're transferring your velocity into heat. and you need a big heat sink to do that. So the better the rotor is at cooling itself down, the more you can rid itself of that heat, so it's available to soak up even more as it slows you down ultimately to a stop. The Zoom brakes are pretty darn solid. I have them actually on my scooter that I was mentioning, the custom one. But the nut brakes themselves are pretty darn good too. And what I like about them is actually their brake pads have heat sinks on them, which help a little bit with that heat dissipation. And paired up with a nice rotor, that does make a bit of a difference more on the top end. But both of them, in most people's use case scenario, commuting or just for general riding, you'll be happy with both. Longest that they're bled properly, well maintained, and they have fresh pads or pads that are in serviceable condition.
I have one last question for you, unless you have any other things that you want to talk about. One of my pet peeves, and you may have even heard me discuss it, is keys in scooters. There's so many companies that make great scooters, but when I see a key on there, I almost discard it. I'm like, no, I don't. One thing to get lost, one thing to dangle in the wind, and one thing that is just an added accessory that can go wrong. And we talked about earlier how I don't believe in locks. Take your scooter with you when you go into the store. If you're going into the doctor, if you're going to school or work or whatever, just bring it in with you. A lock isn't gonna, you live in New York, is a lock gonna stop anybody? So my question is, how do you feel about keys? Are you for or against? And then another technical question is, if a scooter comes with a key, is it something that's easy to delete?
That's a great question, and it's actually it can actually be the differentiator for a lot of customers of if I'm getting this model or not.
I hate keys. Do people say I want it because it has a key?
Yeah. Well,
that I don't get.
In New York, and from my experiences, I won't say I do or do not like them. I don't mind them. Right? They don't bother me much. Where I do see the benefit is an additional deterrent. Right?
But you could pick it up and throw it in the back of a truck.
But exactly, this has no weight, and even if it is locked up, if people, as you were saying, if a thief really wants something, I've seen bikes with 3 locks have all 3 locks cut, and somebody took that bike.
Even motorcycles,
Yeah.
Hawaii has more motorcycles by percentage stolen than any state in the union, and a lot of ways that they do it is they just get 3 or 4 beefy guys, and they run out and they just throw it in the back of the truck.
That's actually how my motorcycle got stolen. I had one stolen about 2 years ago. The guys came with a minivan. It had the steering lock on. It was actually even locked to my other motorcycle, which I don't know why they didn't touch, but it was a bigger bike. I think it's more like a grandpa bike, but nonetheless. They cut the chain between the 2 bikes. They put actually a pipe between each wheel, and there was about 4 guys up into the van and then gone.
So if they can do that with a motorcycle, a big heavy motorcycle, how difficult is it to do to a scooter?
I'll make this my PSA is that they can steal anything, and they will cut your lock. And but it's also
that was a big scooter that just went by.
Oh yeah. Well, admittedly, I thought a pretty powerful scooter was passing by earlier, and it was actually one of the forklifts. I heard the so I was a little embarrassed. It was funny. It's especially in an urban environment, it's really just a numbers game. And that's why I like the key in that space, right? Because, okay, so am I going to steal, I'm a thief out there. Am I going to steal the bike that is, locked up with 3 locks and, has this and that, or the scooter that's, locked up here and there and has a rotor lock and it has a key or a fingerprint sensor in some cases? Or am I going to take this one with 1 lock or the one that the guy left unattended? So it's more of a deterrent in the name of deterrence. And in that case, somebody sees a key, especially if you're ignorant to the electronics or how they work, you're like, okay, wow, I have to deal with that or overcome that if I want to take the scooter from someone. So in that way, I can see why consumers trust it and why they like it, because everybody's familiar with keys. But it still doesn't mitigate the fact that you can pick up these things, generally they're about 60, 70 pounds, and you can take this, pretty much anywhere and through any means of transportation. There's actually a really famous video, I think it's from New Zealand, of a guy unfortunately getting his wolf, stolen as he went into a shop. Thankfully, he caught them right as they were pulling out, and he was able to pull the scooter down and have them, and still have it. I think also maybe take one of the thieves out of the truck with it, which is kind of funny. But, in that case, even if it had the fingerprint sensor, it wouldn't have helped much, or a lock, it wouldn't have helped much. But definitely when it comes to like a properly locked up scooter or stored away scooter, if they see that, I think it does add a bit of a visual deterrence to like, okay, this has something else going on with it that maybe I don't want to deal with. Maybe.
Yeah, I could see an app-based thing where it just you could shut it down from a distance or lock it or whatever using an app. I could kind of understand that, but an actual physical piece of metal that you need to manufacture and it's tied into your electrical system and all that, I'm against that. So anything else? Any final parting words or anything? Is there a scooter that you have the Nami? Is there another scooter that you Jones after that you'd like to see, or you got the top of the heap now?
For me, it's just a matter more of I'm not very possessive about anything in my life. I actually don't have many things of my own. So even the Nami myself, probably, one day I'll pass it on, or once I'm done with the project, we'll see where it ends up being, right? If it ends up being cool, I'm going to keep using it for the long run. But I'm so satisfied with my experience in New York, where people bring Dualtrons and this and that to the shop, and even like really obscure ones like the Curtis Panther, or the Weeped, the SS or FS.
I think the Curtis is Korean made.
Yeah.
Unique,
So like,
yeah.
We get some pretty cool stuff coming through there. So I get my itch scratched from riding a lot of different scooters, and it's a blessing. So many friends we make and so many colleagues that we make and back home that I'm actually more than happy to riding my Horizon around most of the time, like as my everyday scooter, and then I'm more than happy to try these faster ones. But to own all of them is tedious, and I already work on so many scooters that it'd just be exhausting to have more to maintain.
True. I'm probably asking the wrong guy the wrong question.
Like most mechanics, I'll probably drive a beater. I'll drive my Toyota Corolla all the time.
Go. All right, well, it's great talking to you, Greg. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure.
And we'll stay in touch.
Yep.
And listen for the podcast.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Mahalo nui loa, brother. There he goes. Greg from Fluid Free Ride. Join us next time where your host, Dagwood Streets, that's me in case you haven't figured that out yet. We'll read a couple top 5s, top 10s. We'll go around to some people that I kind of trust their word on what were the best scooters of 2021. It's just kind of what do you call that? An indulgence, It's a guilty pleasure. I'm not going to go out and buy the top 5 scooters, but it is kind of cool to know. If you ever subscribe to Motorcyclist or Motorcycle Magazine or Cycle World or Motor Trend or Car and Driver, you know what I'm talking about. It's just fun and interesting to hear about the different models. So join us next week. Until then, keep the shiny side up and the dirty side down.